Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Absolution stream with the 2MK team. And as this is now our NA stream, starting at the standard 7:30 Eastern, you also have some more options for who you actually get to see, and possibly even capacity to participate if you really want to. If you're at all familiar with this game, you know where we are. If you're not particularly familiar with this game but still want to poke around, we are at the Orathian Quarter near, as you can see here, the Shrine Sun. I'm not really sure what to call it. I think it has a name. But we are explicitly testing out some stuff on our here tilted ground. And here is a orange health type enemy to give an idea for who hasn't seen it before of just how strong an NPC can actually be, because this is, aside from bosses, about as tough as they get. In the end, it's a fighting game, and it's one without many complex pressures and so on, so you can't actually mess up that much. They will in fact figure out a way to beat you, but it does take a while, so depending on your health rating, that will generally not be so easy. My character's health is actually fairly low, mainly because I wanted to put a lot more into strikes. But as you can see, we are all here now, but we are not here in the usual way where it is limited to just us three within our session, but as far as I know at the moment, it's possible for others to drift in and out of here. But right now we are fighting on this incline in a much smaller arena than usual to show you what happens when we do that sort of thing. As a result, I will probably be facing Omni first, and you can just watch that. And presumably, yeah, she'll get out of the way, and our match will begin. That's a lot of fainting. If you find this interesting enough that you want to know more about the game in general, anything I don't get to you should be able to find on our previous stream for the day. But I will mention quite a lot of things because it's really hard to understand if I don't. Oof, the long kick. Overall, you should assume that you are looking at the equivalent of a 3D fighting game. And that would be the main first thing you need to understand. Of course, standard fans of the genre would then ask, what character is this that I'm playing? Me. The purpose of Absolver is to give you a set of options from which to build your own fighting style. How you control that is a much longer explanation, but overall, to an extent, every move you see me do is a move I chose for this character to have individually, move by move basis. Whew, that was some lag. Some special lag. I'm not sure what that looked like on Omni's side, but on my side, I struck with a phantom blow. mechanics of the game are basically as simple as you'd expect. You hit a button, someone does an attack. But, unlike most games where you press different buttons to get the attacks, this game only has 2 attack buttons and a stance change button that you spend almost all your time holding. Depending on how exactly you set up your controls, of course. But you definitely can just end up... Right now, for me, I'm just holding the stance button the entire time. Okay, next round. Should have finished that one. Okay then. Since I won that, I'll show off a couple more things first, since I don't normally do that on these streams, and I'll put it into a little more context. Especially if you watched or went back to watch the previous stream, because this was YouTube, for example. A little more explanation might clear it up. This character has stats assigned by me, but they have a very relatively small effect. On the left side of the screen you can see health, stamina, and shard refill, and a damage rating as a generality. The damage rating is more so a marker of how much your character's stats match their fighting style, not just let's boost strength and dexterity to max. No, these things absolutely do matter. If you choose to do that, there will be a benefit to you. But it's like picking one of those heavy hitter characters in games that doesn't have as many escapes or tricky moves. Therefore, speaking of moves, the main thing to understand here is simply this. These attacks on the left side, 1 per stance position, are done with my standard, let's call it lighter attack. And if you hit the second hit, you'll get a mini combo. It's similar to Dead or Alive. And the ones on the right have no built-in combo part. I hit, in my case, R2, and that's it. Some of them are fast, some of them are quite slow. The rest you'll have to understand the other way, by watching people hit each other. So, given that I won last match, and Ami is probably going to move out of the way momentarily, I face off with Rune Siren once again, as we did this morning. At the end of the day, you're still definitely dealing with a full fighting game here. The specific mechanics of the game are a little different than you might expect, but in the end, it's still the same frame data with punishes, trying to fake out your opponent and figure out how to get through their defenses. And using whatever tools you have to outmaneuver and or mislead them. The stances bit, therefore, is related to the way your character turns, and this also goes in within the same combos they're doing. That is the limitation on which moves you can use in which situations. If you've gotten yourself to the point of this character is now using this move, it's usually because you changed to the stance in which you use it. But particularly here, the game has very, very precise hitboxes, and this is the one space in the game that I can think of immediately where this comes up a lot, which is why we're here today to show it off. That, for example, was functionally guard break. But this arena is slanted enough that you have to spend more time thinking about whether or not you are actually in position to land certain high attacks. For example, it is possible, though unlikely, to be so close to your opponent, yet do such a high attack that it goes over their head entirely just because of the difference in elevation. Because it's, again, true raw hitboxes happening here. Similarly, while there are not as many moves that would in any way suffer from being on the lower elevation, your opponent simply has more mobility in specific ways, and some of their lower attacks are likely to hit at higher points on the body, which can occasionally change what's going on. See? There's no way to actually land my most defensive strike, my quickest attack, when my opponent is downhill. Now you might think that this is a general problem that I definitely should try to always be downhill of the opponent so that my hits get the maximum options. Because again, the low ones don't tend to mess up as much. That was so telegraphed. But I thought that she was going to flinch. And the reason I thought she was going to flinch is because of the ability to, as you've seen many times, feint your attack. Simply by pressing block while the attack is animating, you simply change from doing that attack to just blocking, usually. Depending on your execution, you don't have to block. You can instead go into another move almost immediately. The important thing to understand and remember is that when you do this, you have also changed your stance. And even though certain moves are only available from certain stances, you can use this method to shift that stance around. So, if I do this, I will be able to change from a front stance using just the feint into a different stance to get a different attack. I can finish the combo I'm used to and expect, or, particularly with moves such as that long upping elbow you see, I can get around it altogether. Lots of meter usage there. But that one ended about as explosively as I expected it to. Depending on your style, this is not the best of arenas to be fighting in. But, as noted, there's definitely some benefits. If you're fighting against a player with my style whose defensive ability, the special defensive ability the game offers you, entirely dodges attacks, you might be limited in the way these attacks are able to be dodged by your elevation relative to your opponent. Saw that coming, huh? I can be stubborn about it though. Honestly, I expected to just get punched in the head again. So a good example would be expecting to need to move into position that suits your style at the end of a fight. The game does have a standard first to 3 mode that is just standard matchmaking across all players currently in that mode. I don't think it even specifically does things by level, because level really only speaks to how you've played the open world portion of this game. The offline? No. The part of the game where all you spend your time doing is fighting NPCs, as shown before, to gain moves. And jabbed. I think we got lag again, but not that much. Yep, my attacks are definitely misspaced at the moment. And some of that is in fact the spacing of the ground. I think that's still 2-2, but we'll see in a bit. Yep, here we go. Or not. Oh no, there we are. Just more lag. It's also probably not the best place to be having a lot of things going on. There is a reason I'm getting away with that one over and over in this case, but I'll probably explain it later. Okay, I'm not entirely sure I actually won that one, but I'll take it. Especially since, as you can see, my health doesn't recover entirely if the match is too close, so I am slightly at a handicap now. Though the travel distance of lunging attacks is not greatly influenced by this, there is something there to be mentioned. Similarly, very light attacks are very hard to evade, and therefore you can't just assume that your defensive ability is going to be good enough against them. Certain ones are better than others. Light attacks are particularly weaker against the parry to an extent and the armored attack to another. You're not currently seeing anyone with that style. I think I got interrupted. Very much so. I was expecting that to get blocked, and thence the outcome we got. There are a few other things going on that are related directly to the terrain, but because the game can be so direct at close ranges, you might not be able to get to the next position as easily anyway. Oof. And down I go. And I feel that was my third down. Therefore shifting it to be these two to face off. It may be a little bit easier to see the effect I'm talking about on the ground game with them, because the quicker attacks the Omni Rabbit uses are much higher, and therefore being downhill is definitely better. Getting pushed into an uphill position from here might not be so great. In reality, obviously, the high ground is almost always a better thing, but it does in fact still limit your reach. In combat with weapons, it can be much more meaningful, but here, reach is already a largely deciding factor in how fighters interact with each other. Even in fully realistic martial arts, this game is not that, but it definitely tries to get there. They can go on for so long. I believe that was literally 1-0. I'm not sure if that could have been blocked or if that was an actual full whiff punish. The recovery frames in this game and frame data in general is very close to what you'd expect from a fighting game. But of course it's still a little harder to tell. The smaller arena and the tendency to end up nearer to a wall if you keep the same style up for long enough is also obviously a factor to be considered. But people who play games like Tekken and DOA know what it's like to have to adapt to the large difference between a small stage and a large stage. Especially in a game with no throw options. Your method for breaking your opponent's guard in this game, if they were to choose to guard forever, is to simply wear down their stamina. And since stamina is a stat that you can build, I believe that's 2-1 turn siren, you can simply have more stamina. My character has a decent amount. However, it does serve both an offensive and defensive purpose. You can keep attacking for longer, therefore more likely to wear down your opponent's stamina if they don't correctly defend using their special ability. Or you can simply block longer against an opponent who uses quick repetitive attacks trying to wear you down. Eventually they'll probably get something wrong somewhere, or you'll learn enough about their style and skills to actually break through anyway and get a punish. As the punish timings are basically what you'd expect. Using your special ability to defend changes the punishes, but doesn't change the overall strategy too much until you get so good at it that it's Well, if you've watched high level, really high level play of this game online, and that's 2-2 now. Particularly the standard hype match between two Windfall fighters who can in fact just dodge entirely. The stamina ratings in that situation tend to matter quite a bit less. So you can tailor your character toward what you believe to be your own personal style as well. If you're good at reading your opponent's movements and seeing the incoming attack, you can get away with having less stamina because you're not planning on blocking for very long to begin with. And you probably have a style that doesn't necessarily require you to pressure the opponent as heavily. But you can't easily get away from having to have some stamina, giving you more reason to use meter options that lead to that. But if you haven't been necessarily paying full attention, I'll explain what the meter is in my next match. So back to facing Omni, and the meter in question, you can currently see one shard of it behind my character just above the hip. Every time I successfully do a certain type of hit or defend in a specific situation correctly, there is a change to my meter. As you level, you get more of it, and this is usually just as a consequence of going through the game. So finishing the game's, let's call it story mode, will usually end up with you having 5 total. How quickly it builds and rebuilds is again part of your stats. You literally can give your character more meter gain, obviously at the cost of something else. In our case, you'll find that the meter in question is used for the shockwave attack fairly often. Because, you know, we tend to be like full range people trying to fight each other at max range at least some of the time. It's not necessarily all that great just for getting your opponent off you, even though it works for that purpose. You definitely don't think to yourself, I'm just going to use this because you are near me and I don't like that. There needs to be usually a little bit more to it than that. But as you've just seen me do, there is another option. Technically, there are multiple other options, and I just happen to have one that lowers my opponent's stamina. I forgot that did that. But does not matter since the spot for the rebuild was there. No, I'm wrong, because now it's going to decide that I'm not in the area after all. This is an instance-based game, meaning that it's possible to put yourself in and out of the instances with which you are interacting with others, even for something as simple as that. Inviting other players to your instance position is a headache and a hassle, to say the least. So do bear it in mind. While you definitely could come across a lot of people to play, your chances of doing that just wandering around the world are somewhat less. That said, most of the better places to spend your time fighting in this game are also the arenas they've chosen for the standard matchmaking style PvP mode. This tilted place, as you are seeing it, or were seeing it, is not one of those. And I see names that I recognize, which means I'm probably back to where I could see them. There we go. I've arrived in time for a battle. The equivalent of failing to rematch and dropping out of your slot. But that's fine with me. So yes, this spot is not exactly a fair arena. Understanding what benefits you can get from it based on your character style, of course, is how you decide whether or not it's fair enough that you're okay with it. It could be fair in the same way that a stage where there is no wall or no easily accessible wall in a game like Tekken. I guess she's shifting? Just passing time, huh? Alright. Looks like our match is resuming. I didn't think the sweep was coming. That got complex because there was a specific thing I was doing for a very short time, but I wouldn't have been able to explain it in the time frame I had available. So onward. Because frame data is the core of this game and is available, defensive ability or not, it is possible, though difficult because of the way the game is, again similar to Tekken and DOA, to be so negative on block that you can just straight up get punished and can't do anything about it directly. But one of the largest interactions you're seeing here is my opponent backing away and then finding a range at which my attacks will lead to my demise. Now obviously, I'm used to this in games against everyone because I'm so aggressive that, like, it's just the sensible thing to do. Oof. That directional dodge. A perfect use of the same factor. This place is not quite suited for me trying that because the kit goes too high. And now I have no meter. One more to go. Similarly, knowing that that is a thing that will happen because of my style, I simply lean my style further into it. I already have enough moves for just fighting people aggressively. But I always, with all my characters, need moves for just faking people out. And that is what, for example, this is for. Because I don't have to finish that. Using the feint capacity, I can cancel out of that move at a point where my opponent can't be absolutely sure if I intend to finish it or not. And that alone makes it a viable move despite how slow it is. Because you can't tell whether or not I'm going to use it in its full form or just use it to get closer to you a little bit. Getting out of range of it entirely is obviously the better option. But you can see me immediately changing the concept since we got closer to the wall, and therefore it was more reasonable for me to do that. Similarly, you see some kicks here that are basically impossible to dodge fully. The timing for actually succeeding at avoiding these is much harder than a lot of other moves. So if you're facing an opponent who you know will attempt to dodge out of things more often, using that in the correct space in your string means that they have a much harder time. Similarly there, I just thought to myself, I should dodge, but I got kicked the same way I always get kicked, because technically I shouldn't have dodged. Learning the execution of how to chain your moves together correctly can even allow you to repeat the same move, despite the fact that nearly every move you have available to you changes you out of the stance you're in to another one. Not everyone. Some moves leave you at the exact same stance, but almost always these are quick moves that don't have much power. Occasionally there are some that are so long that they have this option too. That's why we're solving that problem. My opponent has a very good sense of when to use that kick. You'll notice the number of times I get hit by it, especially because I thought it was time to dodge, can get, well, almost 100% at this point, I think. But it isn't as if this is just the move she keeps on doing, you'll notice. It's a very explicit, this is happening now because it's the correct thing to happen now. Meter counters meter, and she was able to get enough back. I believe that's one more to go, at least for my side. That time I had the good sense, you could say, to block properly. I thought I was out of range of that, and that is another thing that we're talking about here. I thought I was out of range because the floor made me believe I was out of range. too close on that one. So even without particularly good execution, because the game does actually require quite a lot of it, you're still able to have most of the experiences this game is intended to give you, at least against people who don't constantly just pressure you because you either don't understand the system or those cases where you face someone who does all that and then runs away as soon as they run out of stamina. Which, you know, you can't really complain this is so unfair because people do that in fighting games of all types. And I believe that was all three, so here we go again. Similarly, Omni's choice of punches and quick engage options, they aren't as hard to dodge as I make them out to be, but they're hard to dodge on reaction, so I have to be setting up a situation in which I think they're going to happen before it's a good idea to try to escape them. If you mess up the first, it's too hard to dodge the second, for example. But the actual windfall dodge has a long enough animation that after a while you learn to recognize that it's happened. That bat dash though. And there you have a feinted elbow strike into sweep, which is among the better ways to do that if you don't think your opponent has any chance of blocking. If you're reasonably sure, no, you're counterattacking now, that's probably your best bet. Not necessarily this specific move I'm talking about that I have, but anything of the same caliber, anything like it enough for the purposes. I took too long to get around to that because technically the plan was to go for the knee, be out of range on the knee, and then dodge the follow-up. Or rather dodge the whiff punish. My opponent was ready for that and decided instead, no, I'm going to go for sweep because I know that if you're going to do this, if you want to try to get away from me, you must dodge high. Like all fighting games, the specifics of this can be harder to see. Especially if you're not used to the game as a whole. But, as with any game, once you've gotten used to watching characters do what characters do, it's a lot easier to tell what's coming, what you need to look out for, and whether or not your opponent is taking a specific course of action or taking a specific thing as seriously as you are. That was probably lag. I feel like that was lag that caused that. it's not necessarily grounds for a rematch because lag would definitely have affected either side, so we're back to this side. My handicap's kind of high now though, as it should be. That was far too many movements. But that is also part of the flow, having to learn how many feints you get to reasonably go through before you actually have to worry about your opponent striking you. Once again, a distance thing. On top of that, there are entire moves that have specific properties of evasion, i.e. you can get hitboxes and hurtboxes to move around, and in some cases, one or two moves actually outright parry up other attacks. Not to mention all the moves that let you armor directly through attacks. This is itself entirely separate from the use of armor using your meter that you can see at times, or if you were watching our EU stream, you would have been able to see sun apply to the matches. Visually it's just a white glow versus a green one, but here the same sort of thing has to be considered. Even though none of us tend to have armored moves, you're thinking about a lot of things in the same way. As the armor isn't so much the requirement, it's simply I can go through your attack and I need to think about which attacks I can go through and therefore which ones I should try to go through, as opposed to which ones I need to deal with otherwise, be it blocking or getting out of the way. Every time I think to dodge, it's that kick. I should have fainted. And both having the same thought at the same time, actually this game does have trades in it, but the chances that you actually manage the trade are quite small. Onward then. As with most of our streams of Absolver, this is mostly just to quote-unquote pass time and show off the game a little bit. We do after all enjoy playing it, why not just stream it too? This, therefore, is another way of making it clear to people that you will have some really janky arenas if you choose to just fight in the open world in this game. If you're unlucky, you'll even find a couple players laying in wait for you in places like this. But there's no downside to losing at basically any point. You can just treat them as a weird boss that you can't beat. And since you can almost always just avoid them by switching your game mode, you don't necessarily have to continually allow yourself to be harassed if you think of it that way. If you're not learning anything at all and you feel it's better that you don't fight them, then just shift out and don't fight them. Sadly, I can't necessarily say what the game's community is like anymore, because it's been a while since this game came out, and therefore been a while since this game was popular. If you are familiar with the developers through their newer game Sifu, you might be able to see a lot of the stuff going on in this game as things that somehow influenced that one. And if you've ever played that game and thought to yourself, yes, but what if it was more like, well, this, I guess. Now you have some idea where to find it if you somehow didn't already. But this is in fact the last on-stream bout of the night. Not necessarily the stream is ending right away because we have a little walking to do. Specifically, if you decide to do open world things and you decide you want to change your battle arena, you have to walk to your next battle arena. Depending on what game you play, that might just be about the same amount of time it takes to go through a loading screen though. So off we go. You can expect to find us playing this game for about 3 more weeks, I believe, before the release of DNF Duel. Unless there's a beta weekend, in which case, yeah, we'll probably overwrite this slot with any beta weekend work that we want to do in DNF. You can find all of our bots for our other games, training mode ones, at our website 2-mk.org. I think we jump down here, right? Yes, we do. And whether or not we're streaming can be found... Ooh, another orange person. Good to see. At our Twitter. Thank you for interrupting me, orange health person. Our Twitter 2_MK... No, I have it right. 2_MK_FGC is where you can get all the information on whether or not we are streaming on a particular day, which streams we're having, as we don't always have the EU stream. And similar weekend shenanigans depending on whether or not we're releasing a bot on the Friday. There is generally no content on Fridays. But we are working on more bots recently, so you will probably be able to see one of those in not necessarily the upcoming Friday, but maybe the one after that. I think my teammates have disappeared or something. But that is alright, because as noted, this is the stream end. You can join us tomorrow for our Street Fighter V Mishmash Monday Battle Lounge, or Battle Lounges, depending. And on Tuesday, for the Tuesday Melt, our Melty Blood content. We're not expecting that this week we will actually have Wednesday content because of preparations and movements relative to Combo Breaker. Only a few of us are going this time, but still, there's a lot of stuff to do and prepare for, and possibly training. And you don't necessarily want to train for that sort of thing on streams too much, unless you're super confident, and we don't play these games enough to be that confident. You can catch us in King of Fighters 15 on a Feeling Thursday, and Saturday for Dead or Alive 6, our 60 times lobbies. With that, therefore, this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training, and good night, everyone.